games to two different sheets. First will be the link debate. The second sheet will be the alternative debate.
It's like this new trend.
Would you prefer that I just...
No. I was just... I'd seen this happen like once before this weekend and never happened for debate.
It was all the rage like 2-3 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's probably when I was judging, like, now it's...
Yeah, it's so 04.
Link and then what on the other page?
Links and then alternative on the other page.
Well, what was that Emory team, like the Asian guy, what was his name?
Beckley and Lou?
Yeah, Beckley and Lou used to do this all the time.
Asian guy?
I mean, I knew you'd know what I meant, but you'd get it.
Yeah, I got it, that's true. So anyway, framework, link, alt.
Yeah. This will be good enough for framework.
I don't really judge it like case, which is really the truth, so that's part of it.
Hold on, I gotta find framework. Alright.
No, just start.
Okay.
Top of the debate, we will make a couple distinctions that mean that they are going to lose the round. First argument that we will extend is the role of the judge. All of these arguments of implementation are irrelevant to whether you vote affirmative. First argument is that they have conceded that we do not have to evaluate the impacts, which means that even if they are able to win a link, that is not a reason why our criticism is wrong. Second argument is the role of the judge as a journal editor. Our argument is that even if they are able to win their argument, that is not not a reason to publish that is not a reason to reject the publication of our article. That is just a reason to publish a response article to our criticism, which means you still vote affirmative even if they won 100% of the links. Next argument we will make is that they are not the same thing as rhetorical criticism. We will make a couple distinctions here. First, they do not solve the affirmative. Traditional criticism does not provide a space for resistance and is stuck in the moral high ground. This is Crowley. In 92, we academic rhetoricians must bear responsibility. Our retreat from philosophical idealism and our conservative technique have reduced us to bickering among ourselves, and we ought to be showing people rhetoric is practiced by how language is deployed as a means of coercion and how they can resist that type of coercion. They do not provide a systemic implementation of that policy. Our argument is that we at least give you a direction in our action, i.e. something to the Supreme Court to do and what individuals can do. That's the correct 2005 evidence that we are able to resist a hegemonic structure of language. Second argument is traditional criticism means that they are stuck in old models of domination. This is Crowley again in 1992, ideological criticism or superior claims and attention because they acknowledge all criticism are embedded into practitioners of values, and the criticism must necessarily be contextualized by considering a practitioner's position in the world. Traditional criticism does not make unwarranted claims to universality, and that one effect is doing in the Parsons' continuing domination of critical conversations, even though the current critical conversation may be examined in plurals, it is actually exclusionary and excludes certain practices and criticisms from other criticisms. This is also reasons why we would necessarily be able to access the permutation. These are also justifications for the permutation, which we will make later on in the debate. Link. First argument is on the race argument. We are able to solve back the internal warrants of this evidence because this evidence is talking about how there will always be conflict inevitable unless we put position politics in necessarily a nuanced position in which we are able to position that as not an end-all be-all, but still be able to create and kind of change. Our clear 94 evidence indicates a reconceptualization of law through rhetorical criticism allows us to invoke multiple different perspectives and allow us to escape the world of capital T. Truth argument is that this is necessary to invoke the type of change they're talking about. Next argument is on the Odysseus link. The first argument we will make is Odysseus is a description of the status quo. It is descriptive of Bush calling America freedom lovers versus Islamic evil. This is not us. This is the status quo, which means that they are not able to solve. It also means that we are able to weigh the merits of the YC as an impact turn to their affirmative. Second argument is that we are able to fundamentally collapse the war on terrorism based on ability to because it is based on the ability to condition the other. That is our Butler 2004 evidence, which means that we would have a reason why to prefer the permutation because we can collapse the war on terrorism and still have clearly identifiable enemies post these arguments. Well, we don't go to the strong argument here. First argument is they do not access the strong argument because it's not a policy round. We are not defending the implementation, which means that you do not get to evaluate the impact of your argument. Second argument is not descriptive of us. It is descriptive of the status quo. That all analysis is above, and even if you evaluate these arguments, we will impact turn that here, not taking away the distinction to ends and analysts for this Butler 2004. The indefinite detention of the United Prisoners is practice presupposes the indefinite extension of the war on terrorism. This war has been a permanent part of the state apparatus. The state needs to itself to suspend the Constitution or to manipulate the geography of detention. The trials of the Constitution and international rights are effectively suspended. This also proves that Schmidt is absolutely incorrect when he's analyzing the war on terrorism because there is always a faceless enemy which justifies any kind of invasion of other countries like Iraq because we can say that they are part of that world, and we'll also make arguments as to why our conception of human rights is not necessarily bunked. The first argument is universality is not the problem. In fact, affirmative exploits the problems of universality by making it the site of contest. This allows performative politics as Butler in 2005. The problem is not with universality as such, but with the operation of universality fails to respond to cultural particularity and fails to undergo reformulation of itself in response to the social and cultural conditions it includes. From the scope of applicability, when a universal precept cannot be appropriated, the universal precept itself becomes a set of context, a theme, and an object of democratic debate. This is also impacted by the solvency evidence that we are reading that indicates the only true democratic politics in which we are able to create new zones of inclusion is necessarily the affirmative. Our argument is that this type of zoning is a precondition to solving any kind of violence. We'll also make arguments that even if they're able to win a link, we would be able to win it because it places the system in a zone of crisis in which we must be able to create, reform, or face extinction. This Butler test 5. Certain practices of recognition market side of rupture within the horizon of normativity, all the institutions of new norms putting into question the giveness of the prevalent normative horizon will not do to collapse the notion of the other norms and claiming that the other is explicitly present. The very unrecognizability of the other brings about a crisis in the norms of government recognition of a recognition that fails. Again and again, I come to question the normative horizon which recognition takes place. This question is part of the society that can find no satisfaction whose unsatisfiability establishes the critical point of departure in the interrogation of available norms. We will also make arguments against Schmidt specifically. Schmidt reads Gable in his conclusion of the exceptional state and exceptional event within the sovereign ignores the misuse of exceptionalism. His arguments that applies to Anderson. In 2005, the prerogative of Schmidt's sovereign to decide whether the sovereign inverts the sequence of the institutional prerogative of sovereignty. Does decision on the exception precedes the event and that is only justified by the event's possibility. Schmidt's argument undermines the possibility the exception is the cause of and reason of exceptionalism. The exceptionalism is inseparable from the sovereign act of naming under the corresponding logical understate the sovereignty of exceptionalism is an inherent permanent feature of the sovereign rule. Nothing can be divorced from its naming, interpretation, and representation. And Schmidt is the status for the desire for a strong sovereign relies on the same discursive framework of terrorism as absolute scientific violence as Anderson in 2005, and we find ourselves trapped in a different glass since the events of September 11th. The terrifying openness of the event interpretation has proven to be a chimera. Discursive, representational, and institutional structures have tight hold on the event. Now we are faced with the powerful claim that exceptional times require exceptional orders. Even the newness of the politics of perception seem depressingly familiar and predictable. And Schmidt characterized the power of the sovereign's justification of a strong state is based on the principles of the government, not the practice. This distinction between the practice and principle exemplified in Gitmo. This is Anderson again in 2005. We should instead begin on the basis that there's nothing new about the violence of liberal regimes and their conflicting claims guided by the principles. Although liberal states preach, pray, and peace and rights, they are also material and historical claims. Very violent one should just state by its principles alone, but its practice, and such principles often ultimately rest on such practices. The way such practices are being carried out is different than before whatever practices are taking place are an assertion of the United States and an exception to the rule. The Kensington state as a part of exception beyond U.S. law has been made public knowledge. We'll also make arguments as to why this proves that there's a solid deficit for their argument, because even if they're able to still be able to claim the end is naming as enemies, our argument is that they are not able to stop the inevitability of violence because the exceptionalism of the state still exists. Alternative. Top of the debate. They cannot contextualize what their argument is within the war on terrorism. This means that you give absolute leniency to the affirmative because we still give you a direction for implementation. This also gives us extreme leeway on the permutation sector. As a status quo as a faceless enemy of what that enemy is within the war on terrorism, which means that we are justified in our invasion. This is all explained on the link debate. Next, the third argument is there's no solvency for the affirmative. They do not take it off the books, and this is the root cause of violence. This is the Butler evidence that we're making that we're reading above. The next argument is the permutation to the plan and declare as enemy. The first argument is because this is consistent with your alternative. This is in process. You say that you should call every individual human. This is consistent with the vulnerable bodies arguments because we can see ourselves as vulnerable to violence and vulnerable to creating violence, but that does not preclude our ability to identify certain enemies. The third argument that we will make is the permutation evidence. We'll be doing both of them would necessarily solve this. Michelson and Shearshow in 2004 detainees is the very manifestation of the existing system and its corollary systems of Islam black holes, foundations of the existing geopolitical order. Sovereignty itself is inevitable, yet particular instances must be confronted with criticism. Must assume a double responsibility. National and international law must be pursued to their limits and set precedents for distance. This law itself cannot be adequate. Sovereignty itself must be torn to the strange versatile and made to work against itself. This also means there's a solvency deficit for the alternative because sovereignty will necessarily always end in violence. We'll also read more evidence on this, seeing the laws, communication, mediates between all schools without preventing intellectual rigidity and ugly, unproductive ad hom debates. Any rhetorical framework necessarily precludes any possibility for a permutation, which means that there's no severances cleaner 1994. Since the analytical turn in jurisprudence, the question of what is law is the most starting point for inquiries by primary responsive to emergence for performance to possibly the realist, moralist, and critical response. Each of these theories has set themselves up in opposition with one another, argue the law from this perspective precludes the possibility of holding a different way at the same time the end result is otherwise healthy differences of opinion justify and intellectual fundamentalism and attempts at communication and fun toward understanding stop at the odd hominem attacks that commonplace. And if they are, make arguments as to why this is severance is impacted by the cleaner evidence that we're reading at the bottom of the way. See, our argument is that this is it always ends in inevitable violence. If we assume there is a capital T truth to any kind of action that we can take, also we will make arguments as to why The politics advocated by the negative operates within a method focused on either inversion of hierarchy as a response to deployment of discourse. This turns cases to Newman in 2001. Derrida continues his critique of essential identity by showing that only an authoritarian identity establishes a series of hierarchical binary relations in philosophy would determine what is subordinated within other. These binary structures nevertheless place a power of philosophical discourse. They provide foundations for the political domination. Binary structures of philosophy perpetuate practices and discourse of domination.
Your interpretation of rhetoric is what? What we talk about, or what?
Our interpretation of what a rhetorical criticism is that it provides a site or text that it analyzes and how that text appears within systems of law or discourse or public policy. How that text is not innocent but actually has real world consequences.
No, I'm talking about rhetoric in context of this round, not of your criticism.
Right, I don't think that's really relevant. I mean, rhetoric is an element of persuasion within language. Our argument is not that rhetoric is good, and that's why we should win. It's rhetorical criticism is good, and that's why we should win. A rhetorical criticism is different. I mean, if you just want me to define rhetoric, sure, we both talk about rhetoric, right? But the distinction we're drawing is that a rhetorical criticism analyzes a text, whereas a traditional criticism just focuses on the ideologues behind that text. We don't focus on the root cause of that domination. It allows it to still exist. Bad shit happens.
Okay, who is the stateless? Your Butler evidence indicates that certain people are stateless. Who are they?
Right, that would be the way that the United States has positioned terrorists right now, right? Because unlawful enemy combatants.
What makes someone stateless?
The way that they have been characterized by the United States are individuals who do not wear uniforms as military officers, so they just become stateless entities that are not bound to any kind of sovereign power that we are.
But they do have a state by which they come from, yes?
Yeah, but under the law, as per the status quo, they are stateless because they don't have a uniform. And because they don't wear uniforms, the law allows us to call them stateless entities that we can kill and put in the
so if we're not evaluating impacts in this round, what are we evaluating?
We're evaluating the substance of the Kieran decision and whether the affirmative's positioning of it is correct. Whether we think it's a good idea. And so far in this round, you have not proven whether or not the Kieran text should be overruled. You've just
even though you say your plan text doesn't mean shit, but it's the rhetorical act of your 1AC that means something. You say overruling Kieran only in your plan text, but you're saying that it's only based on that shit?
It's the conclusion that we draw based on our rhetorical criticism. Right, you're making arguments as to why the implementation of that policy would be bad. That is a separate question as to whether or not we have drawn an appropriate conclusion based on the text that we have analyzed and the power relations that it has created. Right?
What is the conclusion that you're drawing, not what our links are? You draw the conclusion of having a true universal humanity. How is that not being contextualized by the links?
Your links are based on the implementation of a policy that creates universal.
Whatever.
Check out this challenge framework.
Yeah.
Hey, can I get this second old models of domination earlier in the framework page?
Get the what?